Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Don K. Preston, and this is my morning musings. I'm already on my, let me see, about my third cup of coffee here. Enjoying, boy, we've had some fantastic rains. It has been so horribly dry. How dry, you say? Well, I tell you, it's been so dry here in southern Oklahoma. Just last week, I had 3 catfish and 2 bass knock on my front door asking for a drink of water, and I didn't have it to give. Okay, that's my attempt at comedic relief. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, welcome back once again. We appreciate you being here. Again, my name is Don K. Preston, and this is what I call my morning musings. I'm sharing with you some thoughts on a thumbnail sketch of covenant eschatology. As I have explained ever so briefly, all 3 futurist views of eschatology are posited, or they believe in what's known as historical eschatology, that is, the end of human history as we know it. Covenant eschatology, on the other hand, believes that the story of redemption, the story of the restoration of the life lost in Adam, is the story of the end of the old covenant age of Israel. God, as it were, took the death of Adam, posited it under Torah, and so Torah became the very expression, the very symbol, the very identity of the death. So much so that Paul called Torah the ministration of the death. And Paul said, even though the law itself was good and holy, righteous, and spiritual, he said that which was given and which was good, he said, I found it to bring death. Romans chapter 7 and following. So, I've been sharing with you that God placed the overcoming of that death at the end of the old covenant law. That is, covenant eschatology. And you know, one of the great teachings of Jesus so powerfully and so effectively communicates this truth, and yet it's so unbelievably sad how much confusion there is in regard to this particular passage, and that's the Olivet Discourse. Think with me on this. Jesus has been in the temple. He has predicted the destruction of that temple, Matthew chapter 23. As Jesus and his disciples are walking out of that marvelous edifice, the disciples begin to show him the beauty and the size of the stones. Jesus responds to them by saying, "Do you not see all of these things?" And boy, what it must have been like to have seen that temple. Be that as it may, Jesus says, "Do you not see all of these things? The time is coming in which not one stone will be left standing on top of another." In response to Jesus' prediction, the disciples ask, "Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming," your parousia, "and the end of the age?" Now look, the disciples very clearly linked eschatology, i.e. the coming of the Lord and the end of the age, with the destruction of the temple. There's no question about it. It is almost universally admitted that Jesus' prediction of the destruction of Jerusalem was, in the mind of the apostles, tied to the end of the age and his coming. So in the mind of the apostles, eschatology, the end of the age, coming of the Lord, was tied to the fall of Jerusalem. Now, about 99% of commentators say, oh, well, you know, the disciples were confused. They were mistaken. No, they weren't. And the question of whether or not the disciples were confused when they ask or when they link the fall of Jerusalem with the end of the age and the coming of the Lord is one of the most critical questions that we can ask in eschatology. And in my book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings, I have what may very well be one of the lengthiest discussions, one of the most in-depth analysis of the question of whether or not the disciples were confused or just simply wrong to link the fall of Jerusalem and the temple with the Lord's coming and the end of the age. But for brevity's sake, let me ask you this question. Consider this with me. What age did that temple represent? Well, as I demonstrate in this book with multitudinous quotes, scholars recognize and understand the temple represented one age, only one age, and that's the age of Moses and the law. The dissolution of that old covenant system would be the end of that old covenant age. What age were the disciples living in? The old covenant age. Jesus predicted the destruction of the temple, which represented and symbolized and identified the age in which they were living. And they said, well, Lord, tell us, what will be the sign of the end of the age? The end of the age that the temple represents. They were asking about covenant eschatology. The end of the covenant age represented by the temple. When did that temple fall? Well, there's not even any debate about it. It fell in AD 70. Therefore, covenant eschatology, old covenant eschatology, was fulfilled with the fall of the temple that symbolized the old covenant, which was the ministration of the death. This is covenant eschatology. And hey, we've got a lot more. You don't want to miss how the New Testament so clearly sets forth the idea that Christ's coming, the end, the resurrection would occur at the end of the old covenant age of Israel, which is again covenant eschatology. Thanks for joining me for today. We appreciate you being with me. Hey, get a copy of the book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings. Go to my website, www.eschatology.org or www.bibleprophecy.com. Order the book and I will pay shipping. You got to mention that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, however. So once again, We Shall Meet Him in the Air. If you want to read one of the most extensive, one of the most in-depth analysis about whether or not the disciples were confused or wrong when they linked the fall of Jerusalem with the end of the age and Christ coming, you got to have this book. Hey, thanks again. We'll see you on the flip side.